or undertaking the process required by law for altering the agency's disclosure policies. What? That's why you're mad?
This dude is not smart. And the danger in the lack of intelligence and the lack of expertise Elon has. I mean, this guy is one of the most morally vacant, but also just least knowledgeable about these systems that we really know of.
Democrats suing to stop the shutdown of the USAID. And you may remember, if you've been with this channel for some time, all of the Alliance for Retired Americans who sue regularly, right? They need people with standing in certain locations. So they create these little groups, or at least have these groups, join in on lawsuits. We saw this back in 2020 with the Retired Association Americans, right? Of Michigan, of Wisconsin, of Pennsylvania. They filed these suits along with the labor unions to stop this from going away. And let's see what's inside. So they're suing the new Department of Treasury, Scott Bessent, the secretary there, and the Bureau of Fiscal Services. Give us our money. Don't take away our USAID. They say these are plaintiffs for the Retired Americans Association, Federation of Government Employees, and the AFL-CIO. We're suing the Treasury for injunctive relief to halt the unlawful, ongoing, systematic, and continuous disclosure of personnel and financial information contained in the government records to Elon and other members of Doge. Do not let them see the finances, okay? Don't let them open that spreadsheet up. We're going to be in big trouble. Don't let us see it. Millions of individuals engage in financial transactions with the government. The government collects trillions of dollars from individuals who pay their income and loans and other things. People also get money from the federal government, Social Security, and more. Now, the job of effectuating these financial transactions belongs to the DOT, operating through the Bureau of Fiscal Service. Now, to carry out its duties, there are other people who are a party to the transaction. Names, Social Security, birth dates, all that stuff is passed through. We got it. Federal laws protect sensitive personal information against unnecessary disclosures. Now, in the first week, the Treasury Secretary, as Secretary, the defendant, Bessent, violated the restrictions. They say Elon and Doge, they sought access to the Bureau's records for some time, but they were rebuffed by the employee who was then in charge. They fired that dude. Within a week of being sworn in, Mr. Bessent placed that civil servant on leave and granted Doge-affiliated individuals full access to the data and computer systems. He did so without making any public announcement. So what? Who cares? Providing any legal justification or explanation for it. Who cares? He runs the Treasury. He brought them in. Or undertaking the process required by law for altering the agency's disclosure policies. What? That's why you're mad? He didn't tell you about it. He doesn't have to tell you. He didn't give you an explanation. He doesn't owe you an explanation. And he didn't disclose it properly. So you're mad? So the scale of the intrusion into individuals' privacy is massive and unprecedented. No, it is not. We'd rather have a handful of highly competent, qualified people, give them permission to access these things under the power of Trump as delegated to the Treasury, then to Elon. Multiple people involved in this. It's like bringing in anybody from the outside. You hire outside personnel. I'd rather that we know who these people are than whoever that other dude was who was in charge of security for 25 years, who approved every single thing that came across his desk. They say millions of people cannot avoid engaging in financial transactions, and so we've got their records. Bessent's action granting Doge-affiliated individuals ongoing access means that retirees and others have no assurance that their information will receive protection of federal law. It's the assurance of the federal government. Nothing has changed. Because their actions are shrouded in secrecy, individuals will not even have basic information about what information they're sharing or how it's being used. They're complying with the law. The law hasn't changed. People who share information with the federal government should not be forced to share information with Musk or Doge, and federal law says they don't have to. The Privacy Act and generally the IRS make it unlawful for them to hand over records to individuals like Musk or Doge. Plaintiffs filed this action to stop this violation of federal law and protect the privacy records of everybody's information. This court exercises its equitable authority, and we can do that here. They say the Retired Americans have 4.4 million members, teachers, and more. Says this is another group, 800,000 federal civilians, and the SEIU is a labor union. We know who they are. They say that here, the Secretary of the Treasury is responsible for the finances of the government. They process $5 trillion in receipts, a lot of money comes in, a lot of records are kept. To engage in financial transactions, they must collect personal information, and under the Privacy Act, an agency must prepare a notice in the Federal Register when a system is revised. At least 30 days before publishing this, among other things, they have to tell us when there are changes. Like if you're going to change something, you have to provide notice. This concerns payment records. Personal information is inside. This also concerns debt. There's home phone numbers and stuff. This record concerns individuals and other records. And the Privacy Act says that you can't disclose these things. One exception allows disclosures to officers when there's a need. Another exception is for routine use, but they also process taxes. And so there's other disclosure requirements as well. Now, Trump was inaugurated on January 20th. Okay, so that's what the law says, according to them. Then he issued an executive order and he created Doge. The executive order directs the administrator of the USDS to work with agency heads to promote interoperability. Since his inauguration, Trump has not formally identified the individual who would serve as the USDS administrator or the full list of people working at Doge. During the presidential campaign, Trump announced that billionaire Elon would lead at Doge, and he's played a central role. They've not publicly revealed whether he's been made an officer or an employee or remains a private citizen. Sometime after November 5th, Doge representatives reportedly approached officials in the department seeking access to the payment systems. Doge and their efforts to obtain continued after the inauguration. Initially, their request to access the system was rebuffed by this guy, David Lebrick, the highest-ranking career official at the agency, and the individual who had been in charge of the bureau. According to press reports, he advised Doge during the transition period that the information contained in the systems was proprietary and should not be shared outside of the government. So then the Senate confirmed Bessent. He was sworn in. Then on information and belief, they say he and his chief of staff, called Dan Katz, had a meeting with Mr. Lebrick later that week, and he was placed on leave. That high-ranking guy gone. Then he announced, I'm retiring. 35 years in federal service. Goodbye. On information and belief then, after they got rid of that guy, Bessent gave Doge full access to the federal payment systems. Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat, screeches about this, has reported that access has been complete. He has stated that Doge has full access to the system, like all of it, is what this whiny Democrat says. Great. Defendants have not released the full list of Doge-affiliated individuals who have access to these things, and Bessent has reportedly signed off on a plan to give other access to other liaisons working out of USDS. They have not publicly disclosed the members of his team or what their plan is, and there's anonymous sources saying this, that, and the other thing. Musk has also suggested that Doge has the authority to control disbursements. In response to an allegation by Michael Flynn on X, Flynn said, cut out Lutheran Family Services, because he's like, no. We're not importing illegal aliens. Don't be ridiculous. We're Lutheran Family Services. What do? Oh, we import illegal aliens. Oh, got it. General Flynn said, cancel that. Musk said the Doge team is rapidly shutting down these illegal payments. They say, you can't do that. Plaintiffs say this is illegal. They get money from all sorts of benefits, federal black lung benefits, and so on. Their members are supposed to get this money. They pay taxes, and the Bureau is going to collect their information. And so now Trump has to protect their personal information. You can't let everybody see who's making payments to whom. They rely on these systems to make their payments. They don't have the option of having their information looked at, and so they're making this a right to privacy case. Don't look at the records. And there's two lawsuits here. They're not saying, by the way, like bring back the money, saying you can't see what we've spent it on. The Privacy Act prohibits defendants from disclosing records to Musk or anybody else associated with Doge. IRS says you can't give this information up. Defendants have implemented a system for disclosing records on their members, and they haven't gotten consent to them. They've implemented a system for disclosing this to the public as well, and a system for disclosing records. Data Republicans got a lot of them. And so you can't do that, right? We have a right to privacy. You can't give us any of this information. These are like public contracts, right? It's not like they're releasing information about my tax records. Like my forms are not on the internet, hopefully. Although, it's like, okay, we all have to pay taxes. You'd be sick how much tax, you're like sick, right? I would commiserate with you if I saw yours. But the point is, these are public contracts. Like they're not talking about grandma's financial decisions. They're talking about a public disbursement of funds is what the subject of this ultimately is. They don't want you to see it. They say they haven't engaged in reasoned decision-making. They say this is arbitrary and capricious action by the government. And Elon's just like a bull in the china shop running around. So he can't do that. And also, they're acting outside of their discretionary lawful authority, which they don't spend much time on. They can't access these records. It violates their duty. And so you have to declare that a decision by Elon to access the Bureau's records is unlawful. Don't give us the money back. Don't let them see the records. Stop them from accessing the records. Stop them from accessing future records. Grant an injunction to prohibit them from seeing these things and award us attorney's fees and costs. They are freaked out because their grift has been exposed. Sunlight, the best disinfectant. Elon is bringing it to us. So they're really struggling. And as you can see, they're trying to do this sneaky thing where they're trying to commingle the cuts with Medicare and Social Security. Okay, like this is a right to privacy violation for your grandparents and you and your mom, but it's not. They're not interested in those things. They're looking at the public disbursements via the USAID. Then we'll get to the IRS and we'll see what they were targeting people people on, right? And we'll see what they were doing to abuse their office to go after certain people. But they want to commingle this. They want to say, oh, they're cutting Medicaid, they're cutting Social Security, so they can scare our loving grandparents. But it's not true at all. Even CNN points that out.
Constitutional power grab. And it's also one part of a larger illegal and unconstitutional effort by this administration to gut the federal workforce and gut the federal government writ large. If they can get away with this with USAID, they can do it anywhere. And that means that no part of the federal government, including programs like Medicare and Social Security, will be safe from this administration. So it is illegal, and it is just the first stop on this administration's effort to undermine programs and benefits in order to line the pockets of uber wealthy donors and friends of the president.
I will say they do seem sensitive to making sure that people know those programs are not going to be touched. They've been very sensitive about that. But you hear President Trump trying to rationalize what's happening here. And he'll say things like they found $100 million for condoms for Hamas, which is not true. It's been easily refuted. There has been no money, aid money, going for condoms in the Middle East, and yet he repeats it. So knowing that, I mean, what can Congress really do if Democrats control no chamber? What is the recourse here?
Nothing, bro. Nothing you can do about this. It's over. You can throw a hissy fit, but there is no amount of whining that is going to get you to be able to stop the executive branch answering its function. Congress can whine and pass legislation. They control no houses, but the courts can come in here and muck it up because that's how our system works. So Congress can whine and moan about it for as long as they want, but it's not going to happen unless they get one of the houses or both houses back. So they're going to continue to scramble, or they peel off Republicans to join in on their cause, which is another real possibility. So Marco Rubio is coming out. He's now in charge of this. He's delegated some of the power over USAID to other individuals, and he's enough already. Okay, quit your whining. This is for America.
You're now the head of USAID. The head of Doge, Elon Musk, called USAID a criminal organization and added that it is time for it to die. Do you agree with that?
They have basically evolved into an agency that believes that they're not even a U.S. government agency, that they are a global charity, that they take the taxpayer money and they spend it as a global charity, irrespective of whether it is in the national interest or not in the national interest. One of the most common complaints you will get if you go to embassies around the world from State Department officials and ambassadors and the like is USAID is not only not cooperative, they undermine the work that we're doing in that country. They are supporting programs that upset the host government for whom we're trying to work with on a broader scale and so forth. So they're completely unresponsive. They just don't consider that they work for the U.S. They just think they're a global entity and that their master is the globe and not the United States. And that's not what the statute says, and that's not sustainable.
Can it be reformed, or does it need to die?
Well, that was always the goal, was to reform it. But now we have rank insubordination. Now we have basically an active effort. Their basic attitude is we don't work for anyone. We work for ourselves. No agency of government can tell us what to do. So the president made me the acting administrator. I've delegated that power to someone who's there full time, and we're going to go through the same process at USAID as we're going through now at the State Department. This is not about getting rid of foreign aid. There are things that we do at USAID that we should continue to do that makes sense. And we'll have to decide, is that better through the State Department or is that better through something, a reformed USAID? That's the process we're working through. There are things that are happening at USAID that we should not be involved in funding or that we have a lot of questions about, but they're completely uncooperative. So we had no choice but to take dramatic steps to bring this thing under control.
And that has to happen across the board. FBI needs that. They're going to get a dose of that. CIA needs that. They're going to get a dose of that. HHS needs that. They're going to get a dose of that. And the liberals are going to melt down everywhere you look. Here is this woman, Senator Tammy Duckworth, who is very deeply disappointed in Rubio.
You voted to confirm Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. He's now, I guess, acting USAID administrator.
Correct.
What do you think that's going to look like under his leadership? And why do you think USAID matters?
Well, let me answer that second question first. And I'm going to do it by quoting Ronald Reagan. And he said, and I quote, "The ultimate importance to the United States of our security and development assistance programs cannot be exaggerated." That's Ronald Reagan, who talked about
Great. That was 30 years ago.
Was about the military, but
ago.
also about the
Great.
aid programs that are critically important to
40
America's
years ago.
national
Thanks.
security. I am deeply disappointed in Marco Rubio. We met with him prior to the vote and asked him about the freeze that would come to USAID programs. And he reassured the members of the committee that, that it would be turned back on and that babies would not die, medicine would not be prevented from being distributed. But that's exactly what's happening right now. We are going to have a humanitarian crisis on our hands as a result of this funding cut.
Why do you think it is that Elon Musk has become so fixated on USAID, saying it's a left-wing psyop, that it's a criminal?
We're just getting started there, brother. We're going to have a lot more where that came from. After USAID, we got IRS, we got Department of Education, we got FBI, we got CIA, we got DOJ, we got a lot of them.
Organization.
I think this is just a money money grab. This is all about them trying to find ways to fund their billionaire tax cuts. And this is one way that they can do it. This is really a power play. I don't understand the head of Elon Musk. I don't want to try to get into his head. I mean, this is the guy who made 2 Heil Hitler salutes recently. And it's terrifying to me that the president of the United States has given this guy.
Are you going to let her get away with that, Anderson? Even the ADL said he wasn't Naziing anybody. She's nuts.
Access to your data, my data, all Americans' financial data. And, you know, this is not someone that I think should be trusted with access to the U.S. Treasury data files or to the State Department.
Yeah, hilarious. Democrats are now anti-big tech and anti-conglomerations of data. Yeah, right. All right, so here is another one, Ilhan, who's going to be having a rough time now that her funds to her Somalian people are cut off.
USAID move, and they don't want to help the Ilhan Omars or their families. They want to help their own family. Can you explain to those people why you think they should be interested in helping families like yours?
Well, I mean, I think what is really important for the American people to understand is that this money really amounts to less than 1%.
Remember that stupid talking point that other woman brought up yesterday? So you're not going to miss it then.
But our budget is, as a country, it is money that goes to the most vulnerable around the world. It is already appropriated and it can't be reappropriated. And so what we are seeing right now is Elon Musk, a billionaire who is attempting to take away resources from the poorest people around the world. This is someone who is not a government official. He wasn't elected. He's not appointed. He holds foreign debt and foreign interests. And so we should all...
So do you. What qualifies you in a way that does not qualify Elon?
Look at this with cautious eyes and with curiosity to understand why he is making these decisions and why he's being allowed to make these decisions. I also want to remind people, yes, this agency was created with an executive order from John F. Kennedy, but it was also congressionally appropriated in 1998. And so there is no authority that rests within the executive that allows them to sidestep the congressional power that we have to create these agencies and to allocate resources.
Yeah, you can allocate resources, thank you, but you don't get to tell him what he does with those resources or how he executes the laws, unless it's very specific in the statute. And there isn't a statute, even she admits, that created USAID. So the executive created it, they funded it, thanks. So he can do what he wants with that agency and that funding, and he will. He'll put it to good use, and they can sue in the courts if they think they have a leg to stand on to make the case that he can't do what he did. But they have not made that claim yet. We just looked at a lawsuit. They're talking about privacy rights, right? Everybody's talking about privacy rights because they know Trump can do this and has every right to do it, and they're just looking for something else to whine about. So here's AOC. She was also making videos today. Here's what she said.
This dude is probably one of the most unintelligent billionaires I have ever met.
She's talking about Elon.
Or seen, or witnessed, which, you know, you can probably even glean that from watching these people on TV. Anyways, all of that is to say is that they don't do their homework. Clearly, like, they're putting 19-year-olds in at the Treasury. This dude is not smart. And the danger in the lack of intelligence and the lack of expertise Elon has. I mean, this guy is one of the most morally vacant, but also just least knowledgeable about these systems that we really know of. But the point is that what that means is that they're going to hit a button inevitably. They are going to hit a button and things can go sideways.
Whoa, inevitably. Well, that's like multiple syllables. She was way smarter than Elon is. So there's rocket scientist AOC dunking on Elon for being so stupid because he has no idea what he's doing. And he can't figure out an antiquated computer system that's built on proprietary software that only approves requests for funds. There's no other option, just approves. Here is Ron Paul, who we love and have loved for years, also making his point on USAID. He posted this after the news dropped that senators were being locked out of the building.
Buddy, and thank you for tuning in to the weekly report. Audit USAID, then shut it down.
Yes!
As of this writing, when you attempt to access the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID website or social media pages, you are informed that this site can't be reached. The media reports that the new Trump administration has not only frozen USAID activities, but may be planning on bringing it back under control of the U.S. State Department. Other reports, including statements by Elon Musk, suggest that it will be closed completely. If true, the closing of USAID may be one of the most significant changes President Trump has made among the many dramatic actions in his first couple of weeks in office. Many Americans may still have the idea that USAID is a government agency delivering relief at disaster disaster site overseas. They may still remember the bags of rice or grain with the USAID logo on them. That is not USAID. USAID is a key component of the U.S. government's regime change operations worldwide. USAID spends billions of dollars every year propping up NGOs overseas that function as shadow governments, eating away at elected governments that the U.S. interventionists want to overthrow. Behind most U.S. foreign policy disasters overseas, you will see the fingerprints of USAID.
Not anymore, because it's coming to a grinding halt. And we'll wrap it up with Senator Kennedy, who is going to give us an interesting analogy about intercourse and omelets. Here's what he had to say.
It's kind of cool having a president again. Let me try to put all this in context for you. I like omelets. I mean, I really like omelets. I could eat an omelet at every meal.
I had one this morning.
I like omelets better than sex. Not really, but you get the point. I like omelets. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Now, President Trump ran for office. I'm going to review every single penny in the federal budget. Now, how are you going to review the spending in the federal budget without reviewing the spending? And that's what Mr. Musk is doing. Now, many of my Democratic colleagues and some of the tofu-eating wokarati at the USAID are screaming like they're part of a prison riot because they don't want us reviewing the spending.
No, they don't.
But that's all Mr. Musk is doing, and he's finding some pretty interesting stuff. To my friends who are upset, I would say with respect, call somebody who cares. They better get used to this. It's USAID today. It's going to be Department of Education tomorrow. And really, here's what's going on. For 4 years under President Biden, the people in charge asked one simple question. Who needs to pay more in taxes? Well, that's not the question that the Republicans and President Trump are going to ask. Our question is, what the hell happened to the money? And that's all that's going on. If you notice, my Democratic colleagues and the USAID officials, they're not defending the spending. All they're talking about is process. Oh, it's an insurrection, and Elon Musk doesn't have the authority. Well, sure he has the authority. The president gave it to him.
Yeah, exactly.
And all he's doing is looking at the spending, just what the president said he was going to appoint Musk to do. Here's what I hope Rubio and Musk do. I would put together all this absurd spending into a booklet. I'd call a press conference, and in front of God and country and the corporate media and the USAID folks and my Democratic colleagues, I'd go over it, item by item by item, every bit of it. The DEI comic books, the transgender operas, the funding of gain-of-function research. I'd go over every bit of it and say, now, do you want to defend this? And they won't. They can't.
They won't and they can't. And Senator Kennedy is speaking like a man with a clean conscience. He doesn't have anything to worry about on that list that he can't defend or he can't communicate about, but the rest of them can. They're so panicked about it, they don't want you to even see what the records show. And like Kennedy explained, next stop is Department of Education. So get used to it, Democrats. Here's the president explaining what's happening next over there.
And on the Education Department, why nominate Linda McMahon to be the Education Department Secretary if you're going to get rid of the Education Department?
Because I told Linda, I hope you do a great job and put yourself out of a job. I want her to put herself out of a job. Education Department. So we're ranked number 40 out of 40 schools. We're ranked number 1 in cost per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world. And we're ranked at the bottom of the list. We're ranked very badly. And what I want to do is let the states run schools. I believe strongly in school choice. But in addition to that, I want the states to run schools. And I want Linda to put herself out of a job. If I could give the schools back to Iowa and Idaho and Indiana and all these places that run properly, there's many of them, I think. So if you look at the list, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, believe it or not, China's doing very well on that list, a list of well-educated, where they run their school system well. You have a lot of countries, not surprising names. I think that if you moved our schools into some of these states that are really well-run states, they would be as good as Denmark and Norway and Sweden and some of the other states. And then you'd have the laggards, and you know who they are. I don't have to go to it. But you'd have the laggards, the same laggards that are laggards with everything else, including crime. But even them, you'll break it into systems. As an example, if you went to New York, you go to Westchester County, you go to Dutchess County, you go to Suffolk and Long Island and Nassau and Long Island. You have maybe 6 or 7 locations. And you have New York City, which would include the 5 boroughs. And I think even that would run much better than it does right now. Same thing with Los Angeles or California. You'd have Riverside. You'd break it up into 6 or 7 people. But most of them would be states. states and you'd have one, like in Iowa, you give it to the state of Iowa, you give it to the state of Indiana, you give it, these are really well-run states. They don't have debt, they don't have problems, they don't have any crimes, relatively speaking, to speak of. And you would have education that would be the equivalent of Norway and Denmark and various other places that are at the top of the list. We're at the top of the list when it comes to cost per pupil. We spend more money per pupil than any other nation in the world, and yet we're rated number 40. The last ratings came out, you saw them. So they talk about 40 countries, we're rated number 40. And I'd say that if we did this, we would go 20, 30 notches up. We could do great. And we would have some of the best districts in the world.
And we're going to get it done. So Department of Education coming up next, USAID on the chopping block. We also have many other federal agencies to get to. We're going to be here as they do.